New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community. Proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.
Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We're here at episode 517. And today we're going to delve a little bit into not just the new normal that we have today, but also looking out a bit further. So I guess it's a slightly futuristic sort of view on the world. We're calling it the next normal. And today, Eugene Afanasy is here on the show. Welcome along, Eugene. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Paul. 517. Wow, I've been listening to your show for 7 years now, and now I'm a part of it. It's really exciting. Have you had many PR people on your show before?
Well, it's interesting. We have had one or two people that wear the sort of, public relations and communications hats, but I don't. It's not something I would usually do unless I know the person reasonably well, and I know that we can actually have a pretty genuine, relaxed conversation.
Yeah. I still have to say good things about our products.
Yes. Well, maybe you can just give us a short intro to listeners. I mean, we met probably about six plus years ago. You probably remember a little bit more of the background on that, and you've been away in the UK for a couple of years, and COVID sort of brought you back to New Zealand. But where do you fit into this big wide world of tech and media right now?
Right. So I've been working for global tech companies and innovative startups across North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, and here in New Zealand for the last 7 years. The last 2 years I spent working in London, mainly on American and European media technology companies, like LTN Global, who provide broadcast quality internet services, Amino, who create set-top boxes and internet streaming services, and also companies that are helping to develop the next generation of VR and AR devices. Before that, I worked in Auckland with companies like IBM to help bring to the forefront their AI systems, Watson, Facebook, Fitbit. You'll remember a lot of me from back in the day, and of course Ancestry, where if you can remember, 6 years ago we launched Ancestry DNA.
I remember. You were involved in that, and that you brought the Ancestry guys into the office, and I had to spit into a tube that they went away and tested. So I mean, I just find it fascinating the constant evolving technologies that we have, and look, I think you've seen some interesting things. So I'm keen to delve in today. Now you're working with Huawei now. So the last about 8 weeks or so.
Yes.
You've been working with Huawei. So you're not sort of fully deeply embedded there yet, but you seem to be pretty quickly up to play with many of the things happening in the Huawei world. So we'll probably dive into one or two of those sort of newer things that are happening. The phone side, I guess we could delve into, and the politics. We probably won't go too deep into that sort of stuff. I'm really interested in sort of chatting future things. That would be a whole nother show if we wanted to sort of delve in and so on, talk about all the geopolitical landscape and so on. But I'm interested to sort of see what a little bit of what that future looks like for Huawei. But when we got talking recently, some discussions around how are things changing. So I'm curious, just your time in the UK. Here in New Zealand, we kind of feel we're somewhat world leaders with our ultra fast broadband. Our mobile networks have been pretty fast. And pretty robust. We've seen varying sort of stats in terms of how well we're doing. What were your experiences with 2 years outside New Zealand? Well, what did you see, and what was what was the landscape like?
It was internet was a lot cheaper in London, but walking around the streets of London, you'd experience just complete mobile blackouts. If you were to catch the underground, you wouldn't be able to get mobile services on that unless you used that local underground subscription service, which is a bit funny. Paris was a little bit different. You could catch the underground and use 4G mobile services, but in London you couldn't. But what is really interesting is when the pandemic hit, it was the biggest mass behavior change in recent history. Everybody started working from home. Everybody got onto the internet. Not just businesses who were always using the internet, but also schools and some health services. That really, the London internet speeds really took a hit then.
That's interesting, and it doesn't seem to be unique. I remember probably the first client that I spoke to who was really taking things seriously around COVID has a team in China. And a firm that is involved in a lot of manufacturing in China and distribution around the world. And they said once their team and this wasn't just their team. This was China was getting under lockdown. That the internet usage, of course, went up, and the performance went down at I think in a manner that was pretty frustrating for a lot of people trying to get work done. So there were windows of time when they were really, really unproductive, right? And the things that, to a degree, in certain parts of New Zealand anyway, those with good connectivity and appropriate sort of Wi-Fi or wired access on the end of fast broadband access, generally pretty good experience with video meetings, Zoom or Teams or WebEx, etc. Right?
Yeah.
But we've certainly heard about some variances. So what did you actually see there in terms of those variances? How reasonable was it, or did it get a bit sort of stuffed for some people at times?
For a lot of people it was reasonable, but for some, especially in the regional areas, the ability to perform basic work tasks became quite difficult. You're doing everything on the internet now, but experiencing those bottlenecks at that time, it was tough. It was how can you have a client meeting when you can't connect to the internet well, and you can't hear what your client is saying, you can't get a brief, you can't interview someone, it's just
Well, I'm keen to delve a little bit more into that further in the show in terms of what impact does we're working from home have, and some of the challenges we have in New Zealand, and not just working from home. There's a whole raft of things that broadband may be able to be part of the picture in terms of helping us change, and there's other technological things there as well. And here in Auckland, you talked about in the London Underground, and lack of at least mobile connectivity, LTE, 4G connectivity. I think Wi-Fi there, but not necessarily direct mobile access. Right. Within half a block from our office there. In fact, it causes the buildings to shake at times as work on the City Rail link here.
It's just so exciting to
in
actually
Auckland.
Get that now.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be kind of nice if we certainly, for anyone who ends up in a good, locality compared to the City Rail link in Auckland. And over time, I guess, Wellington's already had rail for a very long time. We've had obviously some rail in Auckland, but having this sort of central City Rail link will be really interesting. But that's one thing I hadn't thought too much about is what's the mobile coverage going to be like? It only covers a reasonably short area, so maybe not as impactful as in some scenarios like London, where people are spending quite a big chunk of time underground before the train sort of before the train sort of pops out into the countryside and so on. But it's certainly something we have to think about. Now, COVID-19, of course, has helped facilitate a whole lot of change.
Yeah.
And look, some of that stuff I think a lot of people involved in technology, will have feelings about in terms of the good and the bad of it. But certainly that move to video calling, Zoom, Teams, WebEx, and so on. Google and others in this space too, of course. So there's just been this mass migration, and in fact, I was talking to somebody the other day about their phone system, and they were saying, well, what do we actually need? What do we need a phone system for? And there's we're getting into this time where actually, what is the role of a traditional phone system as we move into a world where
the next generation?
It's actually just normal to do things via video. So you think of boardrooms or meeting rooms that we're always
become the norm,
fitted out with conference calling systems. Basically, just not getting used because everyone has actually now made that switch. It's it's taken some time. The technology's been around for a reasonable point, and it's been used to a degree. But COVID's kind of just pushed that through the roof.
The slow transition towards a digital workspace has been really accelerated by the pandemic. Last year working from home was a nice to have perk. This year it's become a necessity. Everybody's on Zoom and Slack and, you name it, all of those sort of collaboration tools. And everybody's using their laptops, and they're experiencing Zoom fatigue at the moment, staring into a screen the whole time.
Yeah, because you would be, I guess, doing a lot of international work. I mean, in some ways here in New Zealand, for other countries kind of looking at what happens and how habits are here, we're actually 6 to 12 months ahead. This is the future, right?
We've done really well.
We've done the lockdown, and we're more out of lockdown than most parts of the world, and it varies, and there is. Yeah, I think there's a whole mix in different countries in terms of rules and what individuals are comfortable with, what different entities are suggesting. We know the likes of Google and Microsoft and those sort of tech firms, and have said, look, through until mid 2021. Yet here in New Zealand, we kind of have that choice now whether to be working remotely or not, and we're seeing quite an interesting mix. How's that playing out? What are you seeing just within Huawei, right? How often are you in the office? Is that every day? And what are you seeing across the rest of the team?
I've been in the office every day because I need that 8 weeks, and I have to meet everyone. But look, you're right. We've done really well at managing the pandemic here in New Zealand. We are, as you said, 6 to 12 months ahead. So, we need to stop focusing on the new normal and start talking about the next normal, and seeing how that will, how we are moving to this idea where the office is redefining its role, where it's becoming hybrid. Some members of the team are going to work from home. Some members of the team aren't. So we need the right technology to facilitate all of that. The University of Otago published an interesting report that looked at the future of work, and it found that 70% of Kiwis had no regular experience of working from home before the pandemic. They also found that the majority reported to be as productive, if not more productive. But they found that collaboration and communication was the second biggest challenge after not being able to switch off.
Yeah, there's definitely a flip side, isn't there? When you're sitting at home, staring at a screen, doing all these meetings. There's you talked about the Zoom fatigue earlier. There's that aspect. There can be a higher level of productivity because you cut out some of the chit chat and sort of social element. It's quite a strange dynamic. So I'm really pleased actually here, in New Zealand that we're not all on lockdown.
No,
and
of course, buying tickets to festivals, right?
Yeah.
going for corporate runs, which we did yesterday, and won the best individual. We came first on that.
You had a team?
Yeah. We had a team, and that we got the best male. Quite fast with Huawei.
Yeah. So you're competing against other companies?
Yeah. But what I was going to say is that we are expanding our business offering in New Zealand this
Here
year.
comes the sell.
Here comes the sell.
Here comes the sell.
As people are embracing a new way of working, we have launched the Idea Hub Pro.
I went and had a look at that
Yeah.
at your office, and that was one of the reasons I
really impressed.
wanted to catch up. Rubbish, that technology. I just don't know how you could put the Huawei name on it. No, I mean the changes that are really happening at Huawei have been it's just fascinating watching this. It's a really unique position that Huawei is in, and look, there's all sorts of perspectives on the politics and what's the impact? Is Huawei still going to be standing in a year or two? Certainly, you're still releasing phones. I saw the Huawei P40.
P40's doing well. Mate
phone.
40.
So there's a range of phones there, but of course, their impact on the market now is dulled because of what the US have done in terms of blocking the Google Play Store. Right. So even with good hardware, that's limited without quite the same software tie-in, and with chips and things running out, that will sort of impact Huawei's future from a phone perspective.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, there's other devices, and we've got the Huawei Watch GT2 Pro here. I'll have a look at over the next few days. I see audio products coming into the market as well. There's TVs there in the China market. The laptops have recently been trying out. So there's kind of this whole broad sort of ecosystem. It feels like Huawei is really expanding out to be a little bit like Samsung, Sony, other brands in some ways. That actually a really broad consumer electronics sort of play, rather than actually just telecommunications related firm.
Yeah,
and
exactly. And one of the things with all of those different technologies that we'll be putting out there and out there now is Harmony, which is a new OS, and it's all about all of those little things, your watch working really well with your phone, your head earbuds. So what
runs the Harmony OS right now?
Well, we haven't launched it yet, but what will be launched soon, and I'll send you a press release.
Here we go. But have you seen it yet? Is it something you're seeing around the office yet?
I haven't seen it around the office, but I looked at some of the presentations they've done in China, and it looks phenomenal. It's all about being easier for the developers, so creating something on your phone that will work really well with your watch. So, for example, right now you can put your phone in some location of the room and use your watch to take photos of yourself, right? And that's quite a basic task. But in the future, we'll be looking at doing corrective yoga poses, using things like that.
Interesting.
And
this is sort of a whenever the development started, I mean, there's a level of this being sort of a response to Google sort of controlling their ecosystem, and then now the US sort of controlling that even more. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, because we've seen Microsoft try and have a play within the mobile space, not be able to etch out the market share. But we're talking about here Huawei as a company that is
dominated the market share for a long time.
In a really big position smartphone wise, globally. I think in one of the stats, Huawei briefly hit the #1 spot. Is that right?
Yeah, they did.
And then in China, of course, where Huawei is incredibly dominant in the market there. So I think there is. I think going to be an interesting period if Huawei is able to sort out chip supplies and things like that.
Yeah, and we
make
really
the
love
dots
working
join
with
up.
Google, and we'd love to keep working with them. But as you have said, that this whole political situation has made it quite difficult for us. But there's just no way for us to move forward. We can't wait for them to let us go and use Google again. We need to do something, and
but there's no guarantee of that sort of stuff. Of course, changing government and the new president in the US may may change things. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But obviously new products. You mentioned this Idea Hub Pro, and look, there have been one or two products in this space of creating what's effectively a meeting room TV multimedia hub.
3-in-1.
And I mean, I've tried. I can't remember how long ago it was. Maybe sort of 12, 18 months, maybe even 2 years ago. A product from Samsung. It was a sort of digital whiteboard and so on. Use a stylus on it to TV. Project content to it and so on. Certainly Microsoft with there's a Surface Hub. And
Google had a product called Jamboards. I'm not sure if you've seen them. So it's a digital collaboration.
It's kind of a busy space.
It is, yeah.
But the one thing that I've noticed is it's felt to a degree. And this is partly because it is something of a niche space, but it's felt to a degree constrained. We're used to our normal, our smartphones and our laptops and so on. Those things are getting renewed, every year, and with these sort of TV type products. By the time you buy a product, possibly it's already somewhat out of date. Yeah. And then you potentially get further behind. So the interesting thing here, and I actually can't quite remember what the i5 chip was in the Huawei that we had a look at today, whether it was a 8th gen or 10th gen processor, but that actual whole computing component that sits in the back of the TV is an add-on board. Now, we're not hearing that it will be upgradable in the future, but I'd kind of like to think that if newer when newer chips come out at some point in time, you might maybe be able to replace that unit. Who knows? But this idea of decoupling sort of the touch screen from the computing is really interesting. And the device itself is a combination of Android. So the Idea Hub Pro has Android, but you can flick it when you've got that card in, which I think comes standard in the New Zealand market. You can flick it over to Windows, and then you can run your Zoom, Teams, things like that.
And it's got an open SDK for third-party applications as well. So any enterprises who want to use their own version of Zoom or whatever it might be, they can load that onto it as well. So that's quite good.
Definitely makes sense. And I saw there was an interesting dongle that you offer that could plug into, I think Windows machine, Mac, that would basically mirror the screen regardless of what you're doing up to there. Now you still support the Miracast and that sort of stuff as well, but I think it's designed as you do load some software, but then you could actually pass around this little the little dongle goes into a USB port, and you could pass it around if different people wanted to take over the screen. It's not an approach I've seen before. I'm not sure how practical that would or wouldn't be. But overall, I did, as you suggested earlier, I was actually pretty impressed with the product. 4K camera. It's got a level of sort of face tracking, where it takes the facial movements and audio, because it has how many microphones are on the TV?
There are 12 microphones.
12 microphones.
And it uses a beamform technology to detect
zoom in on whoever's
speaking.
Yeah.
So in a way, it acts like a personal producer for anybody who, if there's a number of people around a boardroom table. Or
I'm calling BS on that. That's the PR speak, personal producer. What is this? I get the point that that you're saying. I mean, you can, it's got this 8 meter range, and admittedly, I haven't been outside of the room, so I don't know how good that capability is. But the fact that it can, focus in to a degree on the speaker, avoid some of the other noise, and then actually zoom the camera in on who's speaking. There was a bit of a delay in that, but look, I haven't seen any other product well, actually, there's a few products in the market that do that, but not too many. But what I liked is it's a all-in-one device. It's got the camera, it's got the mics. It's on wheels if you want it. It can go on the wall. You can roll it into a room. Just be careful. Our room's got quite small doors, and I'm not sure it would fit.
This is a challenge.
It would fit through the door. The Samsung wouldn't. We set it all up on its wheels and then tried to get it in, and we had to dismantle it to get it into the room. But yeah, overall, I think really interesting device, and just sort of simplicity of that all-in-one unit. Probably the only thing that I thought was really missing is you can go out and buy these sort of combo systems of a sort of touch screen that goes on boardroom, meeting room table with camera and mics and all these bits which are built into that unit and a PC and so on. And those you can buy as a Zoom room system or a Teams room system. Yeah. And that was really the only sort of shortcoming that I could see that some people will be looking for, is it to be that official Zoom room or team room system, which has an extra layer of simplicity. So if you want to use Teams on it or what have you, then someone's got to go in and sign in, or you've got to put in the details of the meeting that you're joining. But
which isn't too difficult.
Other than that, really interesting product. And coming in at, I thought, were quite good price points. 13,000 New Zealand. I'm presuming that's excluding GST. Maybe not.
Maybe not. But
that's a 65 inch, and then there's an 85
excluding GST.
85 inch at $17,000, which is a massive discount compared to the Microsoft Surface Hub at that sort of size within the New Zealand market. So
it is,
I think that will certainly help sway one or two
any
people.
Businesses can come into Huawei for a demo.
I didn't see an 86 inch there, but you did have the 65.
Yeah, we did have it.
Yeah, look, really interesting to see the technology. Now, I wanted to sort of delve back into some of the other topics that we were sort of talking about in terms of future and change and so on. Something that we talked about before the show is how the world changes now that actually working from home, video meetings is a much more accepted practice, because there are people who've been doing this for a really long time, and I know you and I have, and most of our listeners will have done to varying degrees, had some of this themselves in their organisations, but it's now just totally normal, mainstream. And I'm kind of curious what other changes this might lead to, and part of the reason that I've sort of got an interest sparking in the early days of autonomous vehicles, and why I personally invested in Tesla was around this concept of being able to get quite easily from A to B, and possibly sometime in the future, we will see, be in a position where a vehicle can do a fair chunk of the driving for me, and maybe one day do all the driving. But then there's a kind of a there are variations on that. Of course, here in New Zealand, we've got Whisk Aero, who are testing the autonomous air taxis. And look, that's just fascinating. It's great that the New Zealand regulatory systems and a whole bunch of other things have meant that New Zealand is a great place for that. I hope we'll see more of this sort of testing going on in New Zealand, whether it's autonomous vehicles, flying autonomous vehicles, and other such things.
Imagine going from the Coromandel into Auckland City in a space of 25 minutes rather than driving for 3 hours. To a meeting or something like that.
Yeah, so you could be based in the Coromandel, have you work there
home,
and just
with your idea hub.
Yeah. Here we go.
Here we go.
But
then getting into one of these autonomous aerial taxis and then going to meet your customer downtown or whatever it might be, or going to set up some project or it's very exciting. Very exciting.
So there's that aspect, and I guess that becomes part of this picture of where we need to actually, or where we can work from. And I mean, New Zealand is to a pretty reasonable degree near the forefront in terms of getting out good quality broadband to people in a lot of locations. I mean, we're heading, I think maybe it's end of 2022, where the next stage of the ultra fast broadband network will hit. I think it hits around 85, 86, maybe even 87, somewhere in that range. Percent of the population will have access to ultra fast broadband, should they choose to have it into their home, etc. And I mean, we're seeing very strong uptake. So most people that have it, are switching to it. So that will open up some really interesting opportunities, whether it's somebody who maybe wants to, and I mean, I'm not sure I don't have all the addresses in front of me, but, say someone who works for a firm with maybe an office in Christchurch, but they actually want to be further out in Canterbury, maybe Banks Peninsula, maybe elsewhere, but somewhere where there's a good connectivity, that opens up those opportunities. But also it might be someone actually wants to be a really long way of from an office, whether it's a Auckland office or anywhere else in the country, and they're like, well, actually I like the back of beyond. I don't know quite where we're at with ultra-fast broadband getting to places like Stewart Island, and there's probably
in areas like that, fixed wireless networks make sense because you can deliver very fast broadband type speeds. I think with our 4.5G towers that we did a trial with Spark in 2018, we cracked 1 gigabyte speeds in Christchurch. So bringing technology like that,
technically that's possible. We've got satellite broadband coming
as well as
through from SpaceX. So New Zealand is going to be on top of the fixed capabilities and mobile capabilities. Will be, I think, very very well serviced. So and of course what we see in New Zealand will certainly become relevant in I would think most parts of the world. We do hear about other locations that do really struggle with broadband, and that does still exist to a degree. We have Kiwis who live in places like Bali and other places, and they work this kind of remote sort of lifestyle, and that's worked reasonably well for them. Sometimes up until COVID, when they've just decided to come back, right? If we look forward a bit, I wonder how that sort of plays out. We've got this housing challenge in New Zealand, where we've got a limit of space around our around most cities, and Auckland probably feels the most of that pressure generally, and there are all sorts of rules and regulations that make it difficult to sort of solve that quickly. But I mean, one of the options, and I seem to be coming across more and more people who are just saying, well, who cares about Auckland? Actually, yep, there's nice beaches and there's this or that, but actually I can, live somewhere else and I can actually be right by a beach.
Exactly.
And I've got, a house that's a fraction of the price and varying other combinations of that, right?
And then you can bring your big city income to a rural area and help diversify the economy. I think it's I think what the internet will provide, fast connections and this idea of Zoom towns, I think that's going to go a long way to hopefully solving a housing crisis and maybe even helping boost up regional economies, I think.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that because we've had parts of New Zealand that the likes of Northland where it seems parts of these areas have been sort of left out in the cold and economically for a long time, and we haven't really seen a whole lot of advancement. And I don't think it's easy. I don't think there's a 5-minute fix, but actually just this reality of being able to not just work but study and learn and communicate with a broad range of people being available.
You might remember reading some reports in Kaitaia last year where doctors had to turn people away because they were fully booked, and people would have to drive for 2 hours to see a medical practitioner. We partnered with Lance O'Sullivan, and he has been developing these things called the MyPods, which are 40-foot square shipping container units that's been converted into a medical practice that can be operated by a nurse and an assistant, and they use. We're not
talking robots here to actually operate on people, but it's human, more a sort of a telehealth type scenario. Yeah. So you can turn up. There doesn't have to be a doctor actually at that location.
And then they use the internet, wireless, fixed wireless network to connect all of this different medical technology, and also bring in experts if you need them, who can write a prescription or anything like that. So,
I'm kind of interested how that will play out, and of course, we won't ultimately need probably a whole lot of pods necessarily. I mean, there will be scenarios where people need to come in and they need to see somebody in person, local nurse or something. If that caters to the requirement with the remote doctor, but of course, the ability to use an app, use a video call to talk to a doctor, sort of pretty much wherever you are, particularly as we end up with the very, very large majority of the population having a good quality device with good quality camera on them. And I think there's the advancement going on in wearables as well. You used to represent sort of Fitbit. Of course, we've Huawei doing some very capable devices now with the the standout on the battery life front. Apple adding a lot more from a health perspective, and it seems like that's going to be a continuous part of the involvement. I kind of like to think that you'd be able to pick anywhere in this country or actually anywhere in the world in the future, and your distance from sort of healthcare professionals, from traditional employment and so on, actually isn't going to matter. So if you kind of want to buy that house that's
I think
that's a quarter of the price of a house in Auckland City, then that would totally be an option. And you're not obviously there's a lot to be said for person to person interactions and so on, but that does vary from person to person as well. So I think there's really some times ahead where at the moment we can only sort of look and predict and sort of think through how these dots might join up, and there are other pieces to the puzzle, that we don't quite know about yet. There are aspects of here in New Zealand, I know people that have gone to, say, Thailand to get their eyes lasered, or they've gone. There's the sort of medical tourism, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that's been growing in recent years. So there may be more options. For instance, on the health front, you could go to a New Zealand online GP, or you might, in some cases, go, well, actually, I'll go to the online GP somewhere else. Now, I would imagine, because New Zealand, as a country where we have state involvement and funding of these things, so that's probably reasonably unlikely. But I can imagine that might help level things up in some other markets where medical expertise is very expensive. Obviously, there are cases you still need to go and actually, physically get operations and stuff done.
One of the interesting things on that point is that with super fast internet, and robots, you'll soon be able to do remote surgeries.
Yeah,
and that's been done before.
It's an interesting space, isn't it?
But
how would you feel about being under the knife of either an AI doctor?
An AR doctor,
or an augmented reality scenario where you got the doctor, 1,000 kilometres away. It could be quite interesting if they slip with their gear.
But with super fast internet, if you want to move a robot somehow. And haptics,
have remote arms,
arms.
Yeah.
You'll be able to deliver that. And I think in the next 10 years we'll start seeing a lot of that coming to the forefront as the next way of improving remote healthcare services. Of course, robots are expensive, and all of this technology is expensive.
I know. Yes and no. I mean, what we see, and we've seen this, over a long period, is the prices keep coming down, right? And so, you can buy a smartphone today for $100 that's more powerful than what 10 years ago would cost you $1,000, etc. Certainly, in the years since I finished up at high school, computing power is increased by at least 1,000-fold. Some would say 10,000 or more, and yet the price of technology and in general that more powerful technology is cheaper than what was what was available back then. So these things that at the moment sort of feel a little bit science fiction and futuristic, in reality, depending on what things you talk about that are futuristic, some of those things will just become very mainstream, and they will easily justify their own cost. And we delve into discussions about sort of autonomous vehicles and so on. You think of the cost of having somebody drive a truck around, for instance, the United States on these big long journeys, and I can certainly see a point in time where the cost of that robotic element is
decrease.
Well, and the technology is so good that it'll make sense for that to I guess change the role of people, and look, our employment and our roles have been ever changing, I think, throughout history, as we've found tools to help and technologies, and that's just going to keep happening, isn't it?
At the core of this is the internet, and a good connectivity will provide the right foundation for innovation to thrive.
Okay. Well, look, it's been really good to
thank you for having me here.
To have you on the show and have a bit of a catch up. I think I sort of caught you on most of your PR bits, but no, that was fun. And look, I am genuinely curious around what Huawei's future will look like. It is really interesting. See, this sort of transition into a broader suite of products for Huawei, and I guess the things that we've thought of from Huawei in the past, changing in markets like New Zealand. and we'll be watching, I guess, what goes on in China, because that some of that will be reflected into markets like New Zealand, and how the politics sort of changes the picture in the future. I mean, that's anyone's guess, really. So it's certainly a time of transition ahead. Now, I should say thank you to our NZ Tech Podcast show partners for their great support of the show and of the tech ecosystems here in New Zealand. So, a big thank you to Umbrella Connect, Sumo Logic, Vodafone, Spark, Vocus, and HP. So thank you to those companies. And I should just, as a reminder, say that all of our show partners, we appreciate the support that they give to the ecosystem and to the podcast, but they don't have any editorial control, so I will continue to say what I say and share my opinions, even if at times it's might be challenging for them in some ways, and look, just the freedom to talk to any firm that's not something that either of them have any control of, and look, thanks, Eugene. It's I wasn't quite sure how open things were at Huawei at the moment. So nice that you're able to get a bit of time and come and hang out and chat on the show. And look, I think people like me are interested in terms of what does the future hold for Huawei. What is the picture going to look like here in New Zealand over the next year or two ahead, whether it's TVs and audio and other sort of consumer electronics
technology
things.
As well, solar powered technology.
Okay.
Well, apparently we are the world's biggest suppliers of the inverter market, which connects AC to DC from the. But smart solar power solutions is another thing that we are looking to move into.
A lot of things that Huawei's doing that we might not necessarily know about, and we'll have to next week. We'll be doing more sort of a tech newsy segment, so we'll delve into probably a little bit about Kia Aerospace, who've been in the news this week for their unmanned solar powered aircraft that are going to be involved in aerial photography, which has traditionally sort of been done from space.
Very cool.
And they're putting up these aircraft that will go up to I think about 20 kilometres up. Wow. So what's that, about 60,000 feet? And although kilometres is probably the right measurement for us being in New Zealand, and doing aerial photography from there, and sort of really bringing down the cost and increasing the regularity of those sorts of things that can be done. And most of us, we look at Google Maps and so on, and we're just used to a lot of that data actually being really outdated. And in fact, I noticed. Just on a slight tangent there, but we've had Google do all the sort of street views around New Zealand. But I saw an Apple car the other day going round with its cameras and stuff on it, and it was just driving through Kingsland here in Auckland, and was taking a bit of footage. So we'll end up with more of that footage, and I guess you get a bit more competition, and this data probably gets a bit fresher, and nice to have a few other options. But New Zealand playing in that space as well. I don't know whether they'll be sort of flying over places like North Korea and whatnot. I imagine they'd get shot down, but probably for non-military usage, I imagine would be their work. If you're doing that for military reasons, you probably go a little bit further up. Anyway, that's us for this week. So thanks everybody for listening in. Thanks to our show partners, and thank you, Eugene, for joining me.
Really enjoyed it, Paul.
Good stuff. All right. Well, thanks everyone. And just a reminder, you can find us on across most of the social media channels. We do often stream these episodes live as well as the audio download podcast, which of course you can find over all of the podcast platforms. So if you're not already following the show on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever is your favorite channel for consuming video, then look out for us on one of those channels, or just for keeping up with our updates. All right, thanks everyone. Catch you next week. See ya.
New Zealand's tech podcast, the voice of the tech community, proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.